Blog Talk Radio.
Context of White Supremacy, Gus T Renegade and Justice in for another program to share constructive information on racism, white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. Broadcasting every day for the month of January. It has been it has been a task, hopefully constructive. Again, I make an effort to make a distinction between being active and being productive. So I hope folks listening in, you have got constructive information tuning in for the month of January, and hopefully that will continue as long as the system of racism, white supremacy exists. I hope we are dedicated to eradicating that system. I'll be back tomorrow. That would be Monday, January the 31st. The show time will be 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific. Frank Wilderson, he'll be joining us. This was a suggestion from a listener. That'll be tomorrow evening. He has just released a book about racism and film. Should be interesting. He has a photograph from Monsters Ball on the cover of his book. Very interesting. We're fundraising for the duration of the month. Please invest if you think the work is constructive. Super helpful. There are links right below the description for the program. And also, post links. Share links to the program. It's super, super helpful to get the information out just so that other people know about it. Post links if you can put it on Facebook, Twitter. If you have a web page, it's very helpful in terms of driving traffic to the site. Again, only if you think you are getting constructive information. Guest for today's program, she wrote an article on the shootings in Tucson, Arizona. That was in January 2011. And we were having a program, and a listener called in and said, I haven't heard anyone speak about this incident as terrorism. When it's black people, if it's a non-white person, it's a terrorist. it's a very different tone than the way they're speaking about what happened in Arizona. And I remember the program, and I said, oh, wait a minute, I have seen someone talk about this incident as terrorism. And I said the article I read, Exposing White Terrorism in the USA, it's linked in the description for this program. Just bang, you can check out the article. I think it's constructive. The author, she is an activist, educator, and university lecturer in justice studies, criminal justice, and sociology. And the direct quote, I think this will give you a nice flavor of the essay. Time has come to give the white supremacist and the white racist their legal punishment, for they are the real terrorists in our midst, with sleeper cells aplenty. The white supremacists are the real threat to peace and the evolution of the planet. If we are to follow the laws they have passed and for which they admit support, they must be punished and banished, perhaps even tortured, for that, too, is the only thing they understand. In their own words, nuke 'em to kingdom come. The author of that piece, our guest for this evening's program, Dr. June Scorza Terpstra. Dr. Terpstra, are you there with us?
I am, and I'm kind of smiling because you read that so seriously, and of course it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek the way I ended that article, because the fervor with those kinds of things were said about Muslims after 2000, the 2001 attacks. It was that kind of narrative, right? That kind of hysterical narrative. And we've heard a lot of it since then, too. And most certainly that's been said about all of the different people of color who, the white imperialist wants to take their lands and take their lives and use their labor. So you were reading it very seriously, and I did write it somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I'm here.
Wow. Is there, well, first, thank you for taking the time to speak with us this evening. Is there anything you would like to tell our listeners that would be helpful as we begin to discuss white supremacy and this essay?
Well, maybe just a little bit of introductory, remarks about that article specifically, since you opened with those last sentences and those last sentiments, because I think the whole, nuke them till they, fry type of sentiment is one that I think of particularly as a very common one heard among whites of almost all classes, but very typically we hear it stereotypically of the working class. And I teach a class on law and terrorism at Northeastern University in Illinois, and I really try to debunk the myths of who's the terrorist and present a framework that actually a scholar named Iqbal Ahmad created years ago, I believe in the 90s, which looks at 5 definitions for terrorism and 5 categories of terrorism, with the state being the first terrorist. And I think that was part of what I was talking about in that article, and I think it's really important for us to frame, terrorism in terms of all of the different categories that it manifests itself in. So it can be state terrorism, it can be organized crime terrorism, it can be political terrorism, and it can be religious terrorism. And then, of course, there's individual terrorism, like the domestic terrorist who terrorizes his family. And all of those different categories can overlap, but they're most certainly not limited to one religious group or one race or one creed. And if we're going to talk about the greatest perpetuation of terrorism historically for the past 600 years, it has been, I would say, white state terrorism from, Britain to France to Belgium to Portugal to Spain to the United States. So those are my introductory remarks that I would start to frame our discussion with, for sure.
Right on. My statement that I frame, that I post on Facebook is white people are terrorism. We'll see. That might not be true. This program, context of white supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system of racism, white supremacy. I use those two terms as synonyms. Racism, white supremacy have the exact same definition for both terms. That definition is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
I do think that, that such a system exists, and I think it was very clearly created, and we can track the creation of it out of the so-called Enlightenment period, where you find, even the term race being used for the first time, really in scholarly discussions as some kind of, hierarchy and categories of, subspecies of humans when we're really all one human being. I'm not sure that I completely agree with the second question, because I think that imperialism and classism and they intersect so much with racism that then we can have these different kinds of ethnocentrisms playing themselves out in incredibly horrible ways with people who are not white. So the whole categorization, that was established, that is white supremacist and is racist, then gets mirrored by other groups. So I don't think that whites own it anymore, and I don't think all whites ever owned it, because I think it was put in place absolutely by the elites, right? So, I think there are definitely ways in which people get serialized and caught in the web of white supremacy and racism of all colors, and then they play out, a lot of hatred and a lot of ugliness towards each other on that basis. So you have the systemic, basis for white supremacy, and then you have the kinds of prejudices and biases that get played out because of it. I don't know if that's as clear as I could make it in terms of how complex I think your second definition was,
I think my definition is quite a bit clearer. than what I just heard from you, but that I could be incorrect. Listeners might, they can make up their own mind. If I may ask, I just want to, do you think it is accurate, it is true, 2011, white people collectively have more power than non-white people collectively? Do you think that is an accurate statement?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that what we're talking about is a system of privilege in place that oftentimes whites don't even recognize, but certainly benefit from. But they also didn't create that system, most of them.
Okay.
And
hang on one
some
second.
of them wouldn't continue to perpetuate it.
Right. Hang on one second. I just want to make sure that's very clear for our listeners. And you are a white woman. Is that accurate?
I am a white. I would say that I'm a white Italian woman.
Okay. You are accepted as white. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So we have a white woman, white Italian woman on the program. I believe the definition that I gave is accurate, and she said that white people have more power than non-white people worldwide, and I believe there is a system in place that is responsible for that. I didn't say anything about white people knowing, not knowing, didn't get into all that. I do think white people are dedicated to making sure they are in charge worldwide. The evidence, I think, is quite strong in support of that. My co-host, Justice, is here. Justice, if you have some questions you would like to ask our guest, your line should be open. Please go right ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Justice.
What do you mean when you say when you are in recovery from systematic white supremacy?
Yeah, I think that it is a way of I'm playing with the whole alcoholism recovery thing, but I'm talking about something that's systemic, right? So white supremacy is systemic. It is something that was put in place through law, policy, practices, procedures, and it has its effects today, and it still has its it has its systemic reinforcement today. And so no matter who you are that's born into this system in the United States, you are still born into a white supremacist, racist system. And so there's a lot of unlearning that has to be done if you're going to be supportive of social justice and if you're going to work to eliminate racism and white supremacy. Was that clear?
Yes. What, well, on your website, you say, what about the alleged Tucson attacker? Why is corporate media not using the terrorist designation for this white man? Race, creed, and ethnicity are consistently mentioned in corporate media when discussing the crimes of red and yellow, black and brown folks, but white people remain invisible in the landscape of terrorism. What causes white people to remain invisible in the landscape of terrorism?
Good question. That's that system I'm talking about. It's a system of teaching people that when it's a crime committed by a white person, it has nothing to do with race. It's an individual pathology. But when it's a crime of someone of color or someone of a creed, like a Muslim or a communist, then it's vilified in the media, and it's talked about in those terms that it's because of the race and the culture and the ethnicity and the creed. Whereas, like I say, this whole business of the culture and the creed, of the white person in America, we don't even begin to deconstruct. And it needs to be deconstructed because it is part and parcel of some of the hugest crimes throughout time.
I'm going to read a part of your book. whiteness, I'm going to read a part of your website. Whiteness, a social construct and a source of privileges for whites around the world, affords a spokesmodel for white is right supremacy, such as Palin. Forms of free speech not allowed non-whites, such as the president. The privileges of whiteness even include whining about and then legislating against people of color attempting to reverse racism by claiming reverse racism. Just so non-white people won't be confused, who causes race to be a problem?
Well, I think that we can say categorically it's constructed by whites. So
Can
because
non-white
there are those people who have the power to define.
Can non-white people practice racism, white supremacy?
They definitely can practice and participate in racism. They are, categorically, in terms of in the strictest sense, no, they can't be white supremacists.
So non-white people can or can't? I didn't catch that.
Pardon me? Ask the question again, please.
So non-white people can or can't? I didn't catch that.
Well, let's take a look. Once again, I think we have to give the complexity of a system like this its due.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that was a problem. Hello?
That was a sound clip. That was not her. So I can be clear. That was her voice, but that was a sound clip. We've had a lot of white people.
You're saying that I'm saying buckets and buckets of words?
I'm saying I played the sound effect. To me, it sounds like you're using a lot of words and you're not being as clear as you could be. But I keep in mind.
Because all I want is just a yes or no.
Oh, and I just think it's more complex than a yes or no answer. I'm sorry. I can't give it a yes or a no.
That's just like Tim Wise.
Well, I'm in good company.
Why did the practice of racism, white supremacy start?
Because it was beneficial to especially the imperialist class that wanted to take over the world, and it still is. Very beneficial to think that the people who you're killing, and for right now, we've got Iraq, Afghanistan, the people that you're killing and taking their land and taking their oil, if they're not as human as you, if they're barbarians, then they're easier to kill, and they're easier to steal from.
Doesn't racism equal white supremacy?
It depends. It depends on really which country you're in, which system you're in. Most certainly in Europe and the United States, it means white supremacy. If you go back to Persian imperialism, or you go back to Chinese imperialism, it really means a kind of racism that has to do with that ethnicity.
You just said it just depends what system you're in. What systems are on this planet?
Well, there's many systems, but most predominantly right now is a form of imperialism that sometimes is called globalization, and that most certainly is embedded with white supremacy and racism. It's also embedded with Christianity versus other religions and using Christianity to wipe out people. So you have an intersection of race, creed, capitalism, class, sexism.
Very interesting. I don't have any more questions at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Context of white supremacy. Before I proceed, this is in your essay, Exposing White Terrorism in the USA. You were talking about your skin color and being in Arizona, and you said, because my skin color is white, many Arizona whites often assume I am racist like them. And I operate with the same suspicion when dealing with white people, that we are in a system of racism, white supremacy. You are a white person, a white woman. I, too, suspect they most likely are a racist. And I have concluded that is logical for non-white people to have that level of suspicion. So I just wanted to ask to see if you think what I just said, if it makes logical sense, and if me being suspicious of you because you are a white person, if me using that logic, the same logic of the white people in Arizona that think that assume you're racist, if you think that makes sense.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So I'm going to proceed with suspicion just for people who are listening in. I think we picked up a lot of new listeners, and they most likely haven't heard a lot of white people on this program. If you go back in the archives, you can hear Tim Wise. And one of the standard things I have observed with regards to how white people practice racism, white supremacy, is the way that they use words. I think Dr. Terpstra, she points out a brilliant illustration of this in her essay, using the word terrorist skillfully. When they use it, who gets labeled a terrorist, and when they choose not to use it, who does not get labeled a terrorist, regardless of how many people get killed. I have also noted one thing white people will do when they talk about racism, white supremacy, they will not use words in the correct manner. They will not use words to provide clarity. And I played that sound clip, the buckets and buckets of words, because I felt like you were not using words to provide clarity. And that's a standard trend I have observed amongst white people. And I'll even ask, have you observed that? I mean, I think white people are notorious for speaking with forked tongue. Is what I'm saying accurate, logical?
Well, I want to say that there's trying to reduce things to simplicity in a simplistic way that is false. So if I feel like I'm being led in that direction, I'm not going there. And so I will speak with as much eloquence as possible, even if, it's not going very well and it's sounding like buckets and buckets of words. I'll try to bring the complexity to the description that we're trying to get to for the sake of truth.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Can you please lower the vocabulary level, because you just used simplicity, and I did not know what that meant.
Okay. In other words, simple, to make things simple. So, for example, I feel like what's happening, the tension in this discussion right now is about you want me to say something that you feel is true. But I can't say that because I think it's more complex than that.
May I ask?
So I don't want to say something I don't think is true.
Hang on one second. What have I asked you to say is true?
What I'm hearing.
No. What have I asked you to say? I just want, this is what I mean. Just
sure,
answer
you're
the
asking
question.
me to respond
What
yes or no,
have I asked
true
you
or
to
false.
say is true? What have I asked you to say is true? Just let me know.
Okay. what you have asked me to say is true, that all whites speak with forked tongue and use too many words, and I would say false. Not always true.
So that is not true.
Categorically say that.
That is not true.
Can't say, I mean, just
wait a minute.
Actually,
I just want to be clear about what I said. That's all, and then you can proceed. The statement that I said, white people, I believe, are known for speaking with forked tongue. That is, I mean, that's almost legend. I'm not making that up. I think so-called red people, that was the phrase that they used. I think white people are known for this. Now, either that's true or it's not true. Now, you're saying it's not true, right?
I'm saying it is true that is known to be a cultural saying. I think it's also, if you want to take a look at statistically, there may be a preponderance of that, or there may be a lot of that. But I also think we better allow for the reality of many people not speaking with forked tongue and being sincere and being honest and wanting to end white supremacy and racism and still being white.
Okay. What else have I asked you to say to be true? You said I asked you to say all white people are racist or forked tongue. Is there anything else I've asked you to say is true?
Do we really want to, I mean, can we go further in terms of just the discussion we need to have?
Absolutely. This is the procedure. When a white person accuses me of having done something, I immediately want to see if the accusation is true. And you said that you accused me of trying to make you
example correct?
People can judge for themselves. They can judge for themselves. You can go back and check the archives. This is being recorded. So what I asked has been recorded, your response, and the fact that this is about white people being truthful. Beautiful. Context of white supremacy. Absolutely, we can move forward with the discussion. But I want everyone to keep in mind, she said it was logical when I asked her. Remember, we are talking to someone who is white. White people assume she is racist, and I do too. Proceeding. You talk about words. In your report, you talk about the suspect in the Arizona shooting. I believe it's a white person. He has not been designated as a terrorist. I'll even read your paragraph. Why is corporate media not using the terrorist designation for this white man? Okay, you say he's a white man. Race, creed, and ethnicity are consistently mentioned in corporate media when discussing the crimes of red and yellow, black and brown folks. But white people remain invisible in the landscape of terrorism. I just want to contrast this. When the shooting happened at Virginia Tech, 2007, I believe that shooter was a non-white male. Was he labeled a terrorist? Do you recall?
I don't think so. I think we had the same kind of media thing about him being delusional and psychological problems, and yeah.
He was not. You saying he was not labeled? You don't think he was?
I don't. I can't say that I recall completely, but I don't remember that being part of the narrative. Okay.
I didn't recall him being labeled a terrorist either. I'm not gonna say I checked everything. I might, I could be wrong. But I was trying to look for chinks maybe to see if, maybe what she's saying is not accurate. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is one example of a non-white person committing an act of terror, a lot of violence, killing a lot of people, and he didn't get labeled a terrorist. So maybe this doesn't all. I'm just trying to push back to see maybe what would you say if someone presented you with that argument? Here's a case of a non-white person also not being labeled a terrorist. He killed more people than this white person in Arizona. The trend doesn't hold.
What would I say to that?
Yes, ma'am, if someone presented you with that argument.
Yeah, I would say that that's because it's not convenient for those in power right now to label anybody but a Muslim and an Arab and or a North African from an Islamic background as a terrorist. That's really the target of the day.
Oh, okay. So you're saying it's at this point, people in power, I would say, racist man and racist woman, they have a very specific focus to so-called Arabs at this point. So not just anyone is going to get this label of terrorist. Is that accurate?
Correct. And
okay.
I think the difference between your analysis and mine is I would say the racism and white supremacy is in there, but so is the imperialism and that's very, very important because there are people who are anti-imperialists of all colors who, are in solidarity with ending oppression.
Mm-hmm. Since you didn't agree with my definition, may I ask, do you have a concise definition for white supremacy so we can be clear about what you mean when you say white supremacy?
Yeah, I would definitely say that white supremacy is a system that was created by elite Europeans and adopted by elite Americans who are in control of academies
when you
and
say
law.
Europeans, do you mean white people?
First? Could I finish first?
Well, first I would like a clear understanding what you mean by Europeans and Americans.
People from Europe? Sure, people from Europe. But the distinction I'm making with both of you, and I think that's where we're coming into the tension, is I do see this as a class thing. I think very much so that there were poor people and working class people from Europe and the United States who had no part in these definitions and didn't even want part of these definitions.
Well, can we get back to the definition of white supremacy, because that would help me a lot. You started.
Well, that was interrupted. So I'm sorry that that happened, but it was interrupted. So let's go back to white supremacy, a system by which there are categories where white elite males and their partners are, superior. And I think that's important because among the elites or the upper class or whatever you want to, call them of whites, they also determined that there were levels of whites that were not acceptable also.
I understand all that. Can you say your definition of white supremacy for me? Just say it for me slowly one more time, please.
Okay, so a system of categorization about human superiority that was developed by elite ruling class whites from Europe and America.
Okay. I could probably, this is more for listeners than for you. You are a white woman. You don't need to hear anything from me, but for the non-white people listening, if you get that from a white person, that will help you a lot. Getting specific words when they start talking about racism, white supremacy, get their definition, particularly if they don't like yours. Make sure you get theirs. You can probably pick out a lot that's going to be incorrect about what's happening on the planet right now and the definition that the typical white person will give you. I could probably do that if I wrote this definition down. The key word I will focus on just for right now, the word was. We're talking about something that exists right now. My definition reflects the fact this is ongoing. I think her article reflects the fact. Exposing white terrorism in the USA reflects an ongoing system. This is not past tense. We're not talking about, what happened in Europe hundreds of years ago. There are white people doing things right now. That's what I mean about not using words to be accurate, clear. Does that make sense what I just said?
Well, I hear you being, it's fine.
I mean, I don't want you to say anything that's not true. I mean,
I'm not
please.
going to. You're not going to do that to me either. But I see, I just see what's happening and where this is going. So it's okay. I needed to have a definition that had that origins in it. But I most certainly, as you said, my article does testify that, as does all of my articles and all of my teaching, that this is definitely a present problem.
Okay. And also, I guess if I was going to really look at words, you in your same article, it's at the end, kind of your closing tagline. You write, and also pick out for the folks listening, the tension is because of the system of white supremacy. And if it's a conversation with a white person and a non-white person, I'm all right with that tension being there. It should be there because of the system of white supremacy. I know it certainly is not Gus, because I certainly don't have church ignorant on anyone. There's no army behind Gus. In your article exposing white terrorism in the USA, you in the tagline, you write that you are in recovery from systematic white supremacy. What do you mean when you say that you are in recovery from systematic white supremacy?
Justin asked me the same thing, so I didn't know if you missed that part. But
I heard her. I just want to ask again.
You want to go over it again?
Yes, it's very important.
Okay. So it's a system, right? We're born into it. We get taught this. We get taught these categories, stereotypes, these ugly untruths about each other, and so we have to unlearn them. And so to unlearn them means, I'm using that language of alcoholism and addiction. That we're in recovery as we learn not to be racist, ethnocentrist, sexist, classist, homophobic. All of the things we've been taught to be anti-Muslim.
The homophobic thing in there, I hope y'all caught that. So this is important. I try to use these as teaching for non-white people because we're very confused about this. Very important. We've talked about this before. Racism ends up you getting tied intersectionalities with homophobia and that sort of thing. Just pay attention to that. Very important. I'm so glad I asked for non-white people listening. If you need to ask a question more than once, ask. If you need to ask that question 5 times, ask. If that white person, really anyone, if they're real sincere about helping you, and you're being sincere, you're not asking to be, silly, you're not just trying to upset that person or aggravate that person, you really need that question answered, they should be willing to answer. I don't think that's asking too much. So ask again. And I'm so glad I asked that question again because it jogged my memory. If you go back and you listen to the beginning of this program, Dr. Terpstra, white woman, white Italian woman, who admits that she is in recovery from systematic white supremacy. At the beginning of this program, she said, "You read that so serious." When I read one of the other, and I was reading her essay. These weren't my words. This is what she wrote. She said, "You read that so serious, and you're so serious." And she said she was playing this metaphor of AA and saying that she's in recovery from white supremacy. And I hope that stands out. I hope this program, I'm very serious when it comes to racism, white supremacy. The sound clips might be here and all that, but at the end of the day, this is serious business. And hearing you say that at the beginning, that's the closing line to your essay, and hearing you say, "Oh, I was just kind of playing with that. You read it so serious. I was just kind of playing." It makes me think this white person is not really serious about replacing racism, white supremacy with justice. And when I hear a white person, I've heard other white people say something similar to this, I'm in recovery from racism. I don't really think you're serious about the business of ending racism, white supremacy. It sounds, to me, it sounds like, just playing around, having some fun. It just doesn't sound like you're that serious. I don't know. I would like to hear your thoughts. Do you have feedback for that?
Well, I'm actually quite sad to hear you say that, but I do want to mention that when I wrote the article and it was first published at Op-Ed, it was definitely framed as a tongue-in-cheek discussion about, what was happening in the media and not talking about white supremacy. I am very serious, as 30 years life's work testifies to, and those who know me. So, one radio program and a very tense discussion doesn't exactly prove that I'm not sincere, because I am.
True. Do you feel this is very tense?
Sure, yeah, I do. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. I feel like I'm doing my job. If white people come here and they are not comfortable, that's great. Heck, I can tell you guys, I will give myself a double whammy. In my general day activities, white people generally are not made that uncomfortable about anything I'm doing. It's generally no problem for white people to handle me. I'm generally not getting on white people's nerves in my day-to-day activities. So if it's, causing you some distress, us just chatting about white supremacy, woo, I'll even give myself one. Us and Justice.
Woo!
Justice, do you have some questions you would like to ask?
Yes. What? Well, let's see. In your, hold on. Let me go pull it up really quick. There's some from your book. From your website. On your website, you say, yet, when some whites transgress and become race traitors by being liberals, Democrats, or worse, radicals and revolutionaries, they join ranks of those who must be killed to preserve the white way. What are race traitors?
Well, race traitor is a term that was well used in the 50s and is still used for whites who support people in their liberation struggles of all colors and classes.
What do you mean when you say the white way, and what is the white way?
Right, it's a play on words that I'm doing, but I'm talking about in terms of, once again, that, whites do it the right way and nobody else does it the right way. That kind of belief in a white supremacist system.
I don't have any more questions at this time. Gus, are you there?
I don't know if he is.
So I am here. I was trying to get the call line situated. I am here. Sorry about that. Justice, you don't have any more questions?
Right.
There are a lot of people that called in. I wanted to make sure I gave them a second to ask questions. Mr. Edward Williams with counter-racism.com called in. Your line is open if you want to ask questions. If you have a question for Dr. Terpstra, just one. Press 1 and I can get the line open. Mr. Williams, your line is open. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Gus and Justice. And I'd like to say good evening to your guests.
Hello.
Hi, Edward.
I did have one question, and early on in the show, I think I have to do something short in terms of preface for the non-white people that are listening. But early on in the show, you were asked by Gus and Justice about the system of racism, white supremacy, and used a lot of different words to describe what it is from your perspective, including words like classism and things like that. Gus asked you a question, if whether you thought white people collectively were more powerful than non-white people collectively. And I believe your response to that was absolutely. Is that correct? I don't want to misquote you.
Yes, it's statistically sure. I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And then you immediately went into talking about white privilege. Not white power, but white privilege. Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a basic understanding of what privilege is. It's something that's given to you by somebody that's more powerful than you.
Right.
For example, someone can give you driving privileges, and if you misuse those or abuse those, the person that's more powerful than you can take those driving privileges away.
Correct.
So this group of white people who are more powerful than all the non-white people on the planet, they're not only more powerful, they are more privileged. I mean, in fact, they give themselves their power through their privilege. They are powerful and privileged at the same time. In fact, it appears as though the use of the term white privilege is just another way of saying white power without actually saying it. I think that's important for non-white people to understand, because when they look at the picture of white privilege versus white power, many non-white people are confused by the use of that term. But what's really being discussed is the power that white people have and what they're able to do as a result of having that power. And so when this collective group of white people, all the white people on the planet, who are more powerful than all the non-white people on the planet, part of the privilege that they have is they mistreat people on the basis of color. They mistreat the people who they say are not white. And that is white supremacy. The mistreatment of people on the basis of color is racism. Racism, white supremacy is the same thing. So my question to you, I wanted to make sure that the non-white people had that picture in their mind before I asked the question. The question I have for you is, when white people use the term white privilege rather than use the term white power, do they do that in order to confuse non-white people? That's my question. Thank you.
I can't speak for all white people, so I can only say when I use that, I don't. I'm making a distinction just like you did that. You have to have power to confer a set of privileges, right? And like with driving, you can take them away. And that was what I was talking about in the passage that Justice mentioned about white people who are, transgressive, white traitors. That then those who are in power, the whites who are in power, they can take power and privilege away from whites who are not in power. So there's a distinction that I make in all sincerity, because I think it's an important one, especially when we look at working together cross-culture, cross-race, cross-ethnicity to end white supremacy and racism. I think it's an important distinction. So, no, I don't use it to confuse people.
Mr. Edward Williams, counter-racism.com. the person who called in from a blocked number with a hand up, do you have one question for our guest, Dr. Terpstra?
Yes. So greetings and good evening to everyone. Just one question I would like to ask the guest, the Terpstra, is do you think that white people are fundamentally insane? Because a major component central to the white psyche and mindset, according to Dr. Jacob Caruthers, is the dominion and conquest of nature. That's it.
Yes, I would say those people who embrace the dominion and conquest of nature are insane.
I think his question was white people. Was your question, are white people insane?
Yes.
I extended it to any race who embraces that ideology of dominion of nature. I would say that's an insanity.
This is just for listeners. See, that's the sort of thing you got to be careful when you're with a white person, because if that had been my question, I would be very unsatisfied. This all, striving to be adults, practitioners of justice. If someone asks me, do you think all white people are insane? If I don't think that's true, I wouldn't have a problem just saying, no, I don't think all people are insane. I think anyone who blah, 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 blah. Now, if I think all white people are insane, I should be willing to stand by my work. And if I don't want to answer the question, then I should be willing to just say that. To do that 2 times, person who called in from a blocked number, did you have a question you wanted to ask Dr. Terpstra?
Greetings. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Greetings, Gus Justice, as well as Dr. Is it Terpstra?
Terpstra, yeah.
Okay. When you first came on the program, you identified yourself as being white and also Italian. What is the difference with the two?
Well, it's not a matter of difference. It's about specifying a culture from which my family comes that's important to me. Ethnicity.
So you're saying Italian is an ethnicity and it's not white?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that it's an important part of my culture that I include when I'm talking about my identity.
Okay. So you're saying white and Italian is synonymous?
Yeah, Italians for the most part are white. Many of them are quite brown, but.
What you mean for the most part they're white? I'm getting a bit confused. Are they white or are they not white? Is there a difference with certain groups of Italians that would make them more white than others?
In terms of pigmentation, yes. There is in Italy from the north to the south a prejudice that the people from the south, where I'm from, are darker and yeah. There's a color line. There's a color line there that is also racist in Italy.
So you're saying the brother Italians there could be considered white, but maybe they're questionable. Their racial makeup is questionable as to whether or not they're white enough.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Person who dialed in 7012. Did you have a question for Dr. Terpstra?
Hey, good evening, Gus, Justice, and the guest. I just had a quick question. Do you think that in this system, white people should be allowed to adopt non-white people, specifically black children? And if so, why? Or why not?
That's a tough one. I don't know that I have a hard and fast rule on that. For the most part, I think when you're talking about adoption, it's really important to take a look at, especially if it's cross-race adoption, the understanding people, have about racism in this world and raising children, in a cross-race family. That I think if the family is loving and the intentions are good and sincere, ultimately the child is what is most important, and that child is coming from a good home. People who really care about them.
I'm sorry. What do you mean by cross-raced family?
For example, if a black family wants to adopt a white child, or vice versa.
Okay. Would you find that to be incorrect? Yes or no?
No, I wouldn't find it to be incorrect.
Based off of your understanding of this. Okay. That's all I want to know. So, what about if a same-sex white couple would adopt a black kid? Would you think that would be incorrect?
I think it would be okay as long as it's a good family, yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Person that called in 5785. Did you have a question for Dr. Terpstra? And if you dialed in, if you have a question, press 1. Otherwise, I'll just assume there's tons of people who are just living on the phone line, which is, I guess, okay. Spectators, counter racism is not a spectator activity. 5785, your line is open.
Yes, thank you. Greetings to you, Brother Gus and Justice and the rest of the callers, and to your guest, Dr. Terpstra.
June is fine. You can just call me
June. Great. That was my preference. You said you were in recovery from systemic white supremacy. I'm curious, in terms of my understanding of the field and practice of addiction and recovery, when people are in that process, they are regaining something that they had at one time and was lost or overshadowed by a thing that they are using or doing. I'm curious, what is it that you are, as a white person, recovering? Because from all the historical accounts that I've become aware of, white people have always practiced terroristic acts of abuse against other people. So what would be different about you in your process? What are you recovering, if you will?
Well, it's like, when you're born, you're not born a racist or an abuser or an imperialist or a tyrant. And if your system teaches you to be that, then for you to recover from that system and not be that is the process, right, of liberation.
So you're suggesting that when you were born, you were different. Your belief is you were likely to have been different than what you are now?
Sure, the culture and the learning and absolutely shapes people, right? So some of that shaping's not so good.
Okay. When did you begin your process of recovery? That's my only last thought or question. When did you realize that you were ill and needed a program of recovery?
Probably from a very young age, because I heard a lot of ugly talk about people on the basis of race and sex and creed, and it just seemed like, the circle got smaller and smaller of who was okay.
Can you give us some examples of some of the things that you heard when you were younger that were said against people on the basis of skin color?
Oh, well, I grew up, I'm kind of old. I grew up in the 50s and 60s in Chicago and was, part of the civil rights movement there and saw a lot of ugliness. I marched in Chicago, and I was always struck by whites standing on the side, yelling horrible things and throwing things. And when we went out to do different work in different communities, when we were black and white teams, we got chased, we got eggs thrown at us. I was always horrified at the way that white people were behaving. So, everything from racial slurs to people throwing things, people hurting each other, beating up each other. Yeah.
I think I said at the beginning of the program, white people are terrorism. The person who called in 2736, did you have a question for Dr. Terpstra?
Yes, sir. I apologize. I just called in. I don't know if this has been asked, but I heard you equate a white person with an Italian. I guess I kind of just wanted to know. I'm a bit confused. What exactly is a white person? And I believe Italian is a nationality, not a race. So I'm just kind of confused on what do you mean when you say white person?
I'm talking about what we typically refer to as race, although, of course, biologically there's only one race, the human race, right? So these distinctions have been made, and they're false distinctions. But we're used to those, and so we call people with white skin white. Although sometimes those people technically are very mixed and have many different ethnicities. So that's what I mean by those distinctions.
I guess the follow-up to that would be, is the only reason to designate yourself as white, is the purpose of being white to mistreat people based on color?
Now, for me, the purpose for identifying as white is to end a white racist system, and so first we have to admit that these designations mean something in terms of privilege and power.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The gentleman, I know your name, called in from a block number. The person that just called in from a block number, you just called in, your hand up. Did you have a question?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Greetings to your guest and to the host. You said that this question is for the guest. You said that you're trying to end the system of racism, white supremacy. I've concluded that without the system of racism, white supremacy, white people, so-called white people, biologically would probably become extinct unless some type of zoo was built for you guys to live in. So would you be comfortable with there being no white people on the planet?
Yeah, definitely.
Did you have a follow-up, 909? Did you have a follow-up?
Oh, yeah, well, would you be willing to end racism, white supremacy, kill all the known members of all the family members that you met and know to end the system?
No. Of course not.
So you're saying that all the non-white people on the planet that are being abused by white people, if you can end that by killing the family members that you know, that you've met, you wouldn't be willing to do that?
No, killing's not the answer.
Wait a minute. I thought you said in your essay that the white supremacists that they must be punished and banished, perhaps even tortured. Wait a minute. Oh, you said you were just playing.
Well, see, Gus, I mean, that's the thing. You don't like it that, that I did that tongue-in-cheek. But what I was using was the rhetoric that is used for bombing and nuking, right, people all over the world for power and dominance. And that's the rhetoric I said in the piece that they use, if we're going to use their terms. That most certainly, and that's why I said from the very beginning, I don't think we should be nuking and killing people as the answer to this problem. That's what the imperialist does. That's what the colonizer does, right? So that's not the answer. But I certainly could envision a world where color is gone.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. The question was just asked about how she would feel about no white people on the planet. Now, she said she would be okay with that. The follow-up question, her response to the follow-up suggestion, her response to the follow-up question, at least to me, suggests that that's not true because she's not comfortable with her own family members not being here. So, and I mean, that's understandable. Self-preservation, that's totally understandable. But then the last thing she just said was a world with no color. Very interesting. Very interesting. The person that called in last four digits, 5404, 5404, did you have a question for Dr. Terpstra?
Yes. I wanted to first ask her real quickly, who is or are the imperialists and colonizers, and does she think she has benefited from the imperialists and colonizers?
So the question is, who are the imperialists and colonizers?
Yes.
So, yeah, those are the decision makers in power today that are going into every town and city from the United States to Iraq to Afghanistan and taking over.
Have you benefited from the imperialists and colonizers?
I believe that as an American we all have. So I have, and so have you.
I'm a victim, man. I don't see where I have benefited from the imperialists and colonizers. But are you willing to forfeit what you have benefited from the imperialists and colonizers?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Gus.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And Reckless 2.0, I believe D just called in. I don't know if that was just him. Forgive me, I'm old and victimized. But they're up on the show page. Their show is linked. Support them. They're here at Blog Talk Radio. Reckless 2.0. They are all about racism, white supremacy, and they are very serious. Very serious. The person that called in 3193, did you have a question for Dr. Terpstra?
Yes. You said just a minute ago that you wouldn't be killing any of your family members because that's not the answer. But yet at the same time, it seems to be the answer for why white supremacy is here is because that they're willing to actually kill, torture, enslave, and keep the system going since biblical times. So if we're not willing to go to if you're not willing to go to the extremes to eliminate white supremacy on this planet, if you willing to, the situation would be a harsh decision, pull the trigger or just let the system keep going. If you did find that one catalyst and because as a white person versus non-white person, you do have more influence and power over white supremacy than we do. So if it were up to you, and if you could push that button and white supremacy ended only because it killed, maybe 30% or whoever is actually, white and supremacist and keeps the system going, would you do that?
No. No, I'm not killing my family. I'll educate my family and I'll educate others, but I'm not killing them.
Excluding your family, would you?
Pardon me?
Excluding your family. Like your family's not a part of it. Like they're not even involved if it was everybody.
Would I be a part of like an armed struggle? Is that what you're asking?
No, it doesn't have to be. Well, an armed struggle, it will have to come to that. I believe it will have to come to that. Non-whites have been talking till we're blue in the face. We've talked till we first said mama and dada until our last words is don't shoot.
Right.
So we don't have, from cradle to the grave, the amount of influence over white supremacy that you have. So I guess the question is, it's really not within our hands to gather arms and overthrow, because we would have done that already. So violence doesn't seem to be our answer, but if it were in your hands, 100%, would you, but you wouldn't, what you're saying is to eliminate white supremacy at all, you wouldn't go killing everybody who was involved in it.
No. To me, that's more insanity.
The logic of your responses, and you can correct me, what I'm saying is not true. The logic of your responses suggests that perhaps you did not tell us the truth when the question was asked. Would you be comfortable if there were no longer any white people on the planet? Because it seems like you're not comfortable with the idea of your family not being here, which is totally logical. No problem there at all. I'm saying it seems like if that's the case, that you are not comfortable with the idea of there no longer being white people on the planet, which is, that's fine too. We just want a truthful response. The logic of your responses suggests you are not comfortable with the thought of there no longer being white people on the planet. Now, is what I just said, does it make logical sense?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I feel like, this bifurcation, this yes or no, put it in a category. I just think it's more complex than that. And it goes back to what you said about I just feel like it's more complex than that, and I am sincerely trying to address the complexity and not trying to confuse. So, I think that's important for you and your listeners to know, for me also, that it is sincere, but I'm not willing to say yes or no if I think it's more complex and that there's bits of truth in what we're, there's grains of truth, and then there's ways in which I think we're going off the path of truth.
I'm in total agreement. Let me be clear. I'm in total agreement. We are going off the path of truth. What I would like
is a world where color doesn't matter. That's not the case right now, right? But I'm certainly not going to kill my family because something is in place by which they benefit and privilege. What I want to do is educate them not to accept the privilege and create a world that is about fairness and equality and humanness.
I hope people who've been listening to the program, I hope your alarm just went off. Ding, 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 ding. You just lost. I'm not even going to say it. I hope you go back and listen to archives. Clarification, listening closely.
Okay, what was the problem with that? Tell me what the problem with that was for you.
Oh, even telling my listeners, I'm certainly not going to tell you, a suspected racist. The people listen to the archives. I hope you heard it. Justice, don't say the word.
Okay, Gus, we had agreed on an hour's time, so the hour is overdue, and I'm going to head out now.
the website. Do you want to give me the website before you exit?
Sure, it's JuneTerpstra.com.
JuneTerpstra.com. I'll even spell it. Terpstra, TERPSTRA, JuneTerpstra.com. There's one person that just called in. So, like taking one last call before you exit?
Sure.
Okay. This will be from them, so that way won't be me. Person 1022, last question for Dr. Terpstra, 1022.
Peace and respect. Now, you want a world where they wish there was no color. Is that what I'm getting from you? That you wish there was no color was a concern? Yeah?
That it was of any concern, or that it had anything to do with our humanness and our goodness. Yeah.
Well, before Europeans even came out of before the recessive Europeans even came out of the dominant, there was a time when color was not the problem. It was all one so-called color, where there was more peace and harmony before the recessive gene came out and manifested itself as European. There was a time like this. Have you ever studied that far?
I have studied that idea. I'm not sure that scientifically it's proven that there was such a time, but it's a wonderful thought that there was.
According to who science? Because scientifically, they've carbon dated and found that a so-called bone called Lucy of a woman, which was supposed to be of color, a person of non-white descendancy, existed. And we know in history or in science that that didn't come about till a certain amount of years, and definitely not 2.5 million years ago.
Yeah, she was from Egypt, huh? That's where she was found, yeah.
Right, okay. All right, no problem. That was it. Okay.
King Simon. I don't know. I do want to request an investor. She emailed me a question. She said if you would be okay with no white people on the planet, then why not, at the very least, cease to refer to yourself as a white person now? And also said, are you now, or have you ever been sexually, physically involved with a non-white person? Those were her emailed questions.
Oh, well, yeah, those are very personal questions. But my husband his family's from Egypt. Yes.
Is he a non-white person?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Oh, interesting. The website, JuneTerpstra.com. The article exposing white terrorism in the USA. Again, it's linked in the description. You can click the title and you can read the report. She says she is in recovery from white supremacy. I guess you can judge by our discussion how far she has to go. Dr. June Terpstra, thank you for sharing some of your Sunday evening with us.
Good night.
Good evening. Context of white supremacy. I think we did miss a few callers in there. Sorry, gang. We'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back. Context of white supremacy. Perhaps having switchboard. Let's see if that works. Okay.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity. Using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Context of white supremacy.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of work.
I didn't even have that sound clip up. That man. I do not believe in coincidences. I do not believe in coincidences. Before I share this, we've been having massive technical issues. 3 of the last 4 programs that we've attempted to broadcast here at the Context of White Supremacy, 3 of the last 4 have ended prematurely, including the program that we did at midnight. This is actually program number 2 for Sunday, January 30th, 2011. Even that program at midnight Pacific got cut off, disconnected, So this program is cut short. I am going to do another broadcast at midnight if this gets cut short for any reason. At any rate. And in fact, if Mr. Williams is still on the line, which he might be, I'll bring him on. So if y'all have questions, people who didn't get to ask from yesterday, and when he was on Friday and got off, we can do that. I'll check with Justice, and then I'll see if Mr. Williams, if he is interested in taking a question or two. But I do not believe in coincidence. Moving Ninja, when he was on the program, we spoke afterwards, and he said, the show doesn't seem as serious as it was in the beginning. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. How has it changed? And we, discussed and talked about, it's grown, there are more people listening, things of that sort. I would say the biggest thing, I always pay attention to color. The biggest change you will notice if you back and you listen to the Context of White Supremacy, February 2009 to about November 2009, the biggest change from now to then, we had pretty much exclusively white people on the program when the program first started out. We have had tons of non-white people. In fact, if you go back far enough in the archives, you will hear Gus saying, I really am not that interested in having non-white people on the program. In fact, I wanted a quota. I wanted one non-white person a month. I wanted to talk to white people the rest of the time because I felt it would be more constructive. So if it has become less serious, and it could be a myriad of reasons, that's not being toured first and foremost, but I would also submit if it has become less serious, there are fewer white people on the program than when it started. Very interesting that I think one of the first words out of this suspected racist mouth was, you read it so serious. Be serious and that might have even been the whole source of her detention, the fact that he had non-white people who were serious in asking her questions. I will rest there. Justice, do you have anything you would like to share about what you heard from Dr. Terpstra or anything else?
No.
Did you get any constructive information from her?
That's a good question. I don't know. She was just really confusing. I mean, she was just trying to block out the questions. She didn't even want to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of work. Exactly. I
will see if Mr. Williams is on the line. I just volunteered to say he would answer questions. He might not be interested in answering questions. Mr. Williams, are you there, sir? Your line is open, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay. I volunteered you to answer questions. If you feel like it, feel free to field a question or two. If not, put your feet up and, break if you want.
Oh, sure. If I can help to provide clarity for someone, I most certainly will do so.
All righty. There are a lot of people who called in, so I'm not sure how I would do this, but we'll see if we can solve problems. If you do not have a question for Mr. Williams and you press 1 again, and that'll put your hand back down, so that will let me know that you're good. You don't have a question for Mr. Williams. If you do have a question for Mr. Williams, you can. People are following directions. Beautiful, beautiful. If you do have a question for Mr. Williams, just don't press 1. Leave your hand up. You're good. If you called in before and you did not press 1, you can press 1 now. That will let me know that you have a question for Mr. Williams, and we can proceed. Beautiful. This is what codification is supposed to do: solve problems. Beautiful. Before I get the folks that have questions, do you have any comments about Dr. Terpstra? Tater Pie, she was listening, and she thought that was a brilliant breakdown of the distinction between white power and white privilege. She was really glad that you pointed that out. Is there anything else that stood out about the suspected racist Dr. June Terpstra?
Oh, no, that was, I started to ask her a follow-up question, because even once she gave her answer to the question I asked, she still began to make the distinction of white people with power versus white people without power, and at the same time saying that white people collectively are more powerful than non-white people. So, that the whole term white privilege is just a refined way of talking about white power. That's all it is. It's part of the racist code now, the term white privilege. It's just a way of saying white power without actually saying white power. And so her vernacular is rooted in racist code. Now, she says that there are some white people who will practice racism, but they don't know that they're practicing racism. Now, at the same time, they know that they're more powerful than non-white people, but they, think about it. Just think about that, man. That's Tim Wise.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
That's Peggy McIntosh. That's all of them. That's Dr. Robert Jensen. That's, all rolled up into one. They're using the same words to mean the same thing.
Isn't it? Oh, my apologies for interrupting. I was just going to say, has it been your observation when you observe that phenomenon where everybody is doing the same thing and it's constructed? That's codification.
Yeah, that's a code, racist code. That's how it works. That's how it works. You're witnessing it. See, there was a time where white people were so abusive toward non-white people. You didn't have a chance to witness that. The only thing you witnessed, if you were around back in those days, was getting hit across the head or lynched or shot or burned, but you didn't have the benefit. The refinement of racism, white supremacy is a double-edged sword, and they know it. You didn't have the benefit of being able to listen to them talk and get an understanding of what they're talking about and how it works to maintain the system. I remember Dr. Welsing used to talk about what is it that white people talk about when no non-white people around. but under the refinement of racism, white supremacy, you don't even need to know that. I mean, you can talk to them directly and get an understanding of how the system works. And as racist code, she just laid it right out. I was going to follow up by asking, do you realize it's a contradiction in your discourse? On one hand, you say white people are more collectively than non-white people. On the other hand, you say some white people are less powerful. How do you get away with that? See, that alone will confuse non-white people. Unless she's talking about there are some white people who are less powerful than other white people. Well, what difference does it make? They are more powerful than other white people. Yeah. It's amazing to listen to them talk themselves into circles. I mean, if you know what to listen for, you can catch them every time. They're just talking in circles. And for them, that works because it helps to keep the system going.
Particularly if non-white people are not very serious. I mean, I do not believe in coincidence. That is a matter of record. That was, I think, the first thing she said about the seriousness of the questions being asked and the tone. That strategy, them just talking and saying things that are contradictory, it works really well if you're talking to people who are not that serious. They're not really paying that close of attention to what you're saying. They're not really thinking about it to see if it makes sense. If you're not really serious about racism, white supremacy, white people will be willing to talk to you forever. I mean,
oh yeah, they know how to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
But when non-white people become codified, they don't quite know how to handle that. I mean, you guys, you frustrated her.
She said that repeatedly. She said, "We're having I was drinking lemonade." I didn't think it was that tough. Typical day on the plantation.
That's what happens. I mean, it's a role reversal. I talk about it in the book. Once we change our behavior in terms of how we respond to the system, they're going to change theirs. She said, we agreed to 1 hour. I was over here saying, oh, my God.
She's in recovery.
You have to go watch a John Wayne movie, man. Oh, my God.
Ooh, man.
And, of course, that's not the goal objective, but you have to understand that once you do become serious and use codified language, I mean, you have to expect that is going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. I mean, the closer you get to becoming more serious and more codified, the worse they will act. It's going to happen.
Totally. And I did want to point out all those folks that Mr. Williams mentioned, Dr. Peggy McIntosh, Tim Wise, admitted racist white supremacist, Robert Jensen. All of those folks have been on this program, some of them repeatedly. Go back through the archives. Very interesting performances that they gave on this program. And that sound clip, even, the buckets of words, that is from Tim Wise and visit number 2. Epic. The folks that called in, I'm assuming everyone followed the procedure. And these folks have questions for you, Mr. Williams. So we'll start. Let's see. Person that called in, 3358. Did you have a question for Mr. Williams? Let's see. 3358. Can you hear us? Oh, his line didn't. Okay. Try again. 3358. Oh, I thought I heard him. 3358. Are you there?
Hello.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. No, my my question was for the lady that just left because she confused me. But maybe what's his name again, Mr.
Williams. She called you Edward.
Mr. Williams.
And did you catch
Mr. Williams.
that? Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask.
Oh, yeah, I heard that.
She
I heard
called
that
you
too.
Edward. Did you catch that?
Did you guys know each other?
No, I never heard that lady before in my life.
Okay.
I still don't know how to spell her last name.
All right. No, I just had a because she confused me with the white and Italian, and I just think she is either confused about history herself and its makeup, the Italian makeup of the people, and in general. But I think she's confused, and no, she is not very serious about racism. We're trying to eradicate it, white supremacy. I think she wants to be classified as white and nothing else. Otherwise, she wouldn't have used white and Italian. Because that's like saying that she's mixed, or I'm white and I got some non-color in me as well.
Well, the nation, the white nation, trumps the Italian nation.
Yeah, but the question, what was it? What is white? We know that Italian was just made white not too long ago, but what is white? And she couldn't answer it. So she's confused.
Or she wouldn't answer it.
Yeah,
I know that a lot of times non-white people will assume that white people don't know what they're talking about. And at the end of the day, the white people are still more powerful collectively than the non-white people. I mean, that's an assumption that non-white people got to get away from. Assuming that white people don't know what they're talking about. They know exactly what they're talking about. That's why they're talking about it. And they know how to talk about it. She knows what she's doing. Keeping non-white people confused about what is actually happening. When she gave her definition of racism, or her definition of white supremacy, she threw in all kinds of different things. Classism,
homophobia.
Homophobia.
Let's just lump it all together. As long as the non-white people are confused about what they're looking at, let's just lump it all together.
Mr. Williams, can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so very much for coming back and for trying to clear things up. My confusion, well, not my confusion, but what I was gathering from her when she first started off, first of all, she said that, okay, they want to go to a colorless society, which is what they have a lot of the non-whites repeating this mantra about colorless. She is willing, but she is not willing for any of her family members to disappear. She's saying, yes, she would give it up in a minute. She wants to go colorless. But these people are always saying these things, but yet still they want us to not think of color when the majority of the people on the planet, we are colored. And they're the ones who are trying to push this colorlessness, trying to get you not to see in colors. And they've got a lot of not confused non-whites going along with the same mantra about going to a colorless society. And then she made the point about her husband being a non-white. He's Egyptian. and the confusion with with the different classification of whiteness in Italians. We all know the Moors came through Italy and darkened the nation. So
exactly.
Please, if you could help to give us some clarification, because she is a classic example of white people who gets in the midst of black people, and they feel good about having someone in their midst who is claiming all of this white supremacy stuff, and they feel good and they miss all of the key words that they are throwing out there, and they get more confused than when they initially start listening.
Okay, now I'll answer your question because you asked me, but you might not like the answer. I want to say that up front. There's no such thing as a person that is colorless. They refer to us as people of color or colored people. I mean, how do you know if something is colored? I mean, you got to have contrast between one thing and another. When you have a white person who is standing up in the middle of the street, nothing around them but air, and you can't see the air, but you can see the person, that means that person has color. They're not invisible. His entire system is artificial. All of the people on this planet have color. See, when you made the statement about the Moors in the south of Europe and whatnot, that's true. Have you ever seen the Greeks, the white people who are in Greece today?
Correct.
Many of those white people are darker than non-white people in the United States.
That's true.
Yeah.
The Albanians.
But they are still white. I mean, this whole thing is artificial. It's just a gang of people running around saying that they're white, and they're killing up people and shooting up people and taking things into their possession, and mistreating everybody that says you're not a part of this gang, or you're not a part of this royal family, or you're not, whatever it is that they refer to it as. Right now they're referring to it as a race. And they say because you're not a member of that, you qualify for mistreatment. You are colored, we are not. The whole concept is out of whack. It's no wonder non-white people are confused about it. I mean, even just to sit back and look at it, not even to talk to them about it, but just to sit back and look at how things are structured. You can kill off all of the white people on the planet today, and tomorrow it'll be a whole new group of people saying that they are white, who will be doing the exact same thing that they're doing.
The mentality.
You can have dark-skinned brown people and light-skinned brown people, and the light-skinned brown people saying that they're white. And is mistreating all of the dark-skinned brown people because they say that they're not white. I mean, just look at how things are structured. Can I be heard? Yes. I mean, when you sit back and really think about it, how white is white? You're talking about going to kill all of, not you personally, but there are some non-white people who are talking about killing all the white people. I mean, how do you know when you have killed all of them? How will you know? Everybody lighter than Wesley Snipes? I mean, how will you know?
I guess going into that, I guess, Mr. Williams, what would be your stance on counter-violence? I know because we have some non-white people going around, kill the white devil, blah, blah, blah. And then, there are other non-white people that are squeamish about even the possibility that some people classified as white will probably have to go. So I guess what is your stance on that?
Well, my position is that each individual non-white person has to decide for themselves at a time or place of their own choosing how they're going to respond to being mistreated on the basis of color. If there's a non-white person who's saying that they're going to kill white people, that's just a non-white person who's saying that they're going to kill white people. I mean, they're qualified to say that, being a victim of racism, white supremacy. If there are non-white people who are saying that they're not going to kill white people, that's just a non-white person saying that they're not going to kill white people. They're qualified to say that. That's the position I take.
Sure.
I mean, non-white people, we really think that we got some kind of organization against racism, white supremacy, but you can't organize against it. There's no way to do it. You have to act in a united, independent way, in a united, independent manner. I mean, ain't nobody get killed with Martin Luther King Jr. but Martin Luther King Jr. Now, it was some other black people out there. Standing on the terrace with him. Reverend Jesse Jackson was there. See, when the smartest, most powerful white people are coming after you, all of your friends cannot be found. So whether you know it or not, you are independent in that regard all the time. That's the way the system works. Wish the system didn't exist, doing everything in my power to get rid of it, but right now that's the way it works.
Can I be
heard? Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, no, sir. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you for sharing some more of your time with us tonight. My question was, do you think that the female tonight and Tim Wise and people mentioned before, do you think that they're more of a threat to non-white people than the so-called imperialistic elites that she was talking about? I mean, who do you think? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know who those people are. Yeah, I don't. The imperialistic elite. See, that's the reason why when I asked her that first question about her statement that collectively white people are more powerful than non-white people, and she went into talking about white privilege, what she's really talking about is white power. I mean, from a non-white person's perspective, if all white people are more powerful than me, I don't care what the pecking order is within that group of white people. You know what I mean? That they are more powerful than me. this elite group of white people. I don't know who she's talking about.
Do you think it could be a diversion tactic?
Oh, most definitely.
To make herself seem less suspicious and more on our team, so to speak?
Sure. Yes, sir. I mean, the only reason to talk about a privilege is something you don't have to do nothing to get. Keep that in mind. But if you are powerful, you had to do something to get that power. The message that the more refined racist white supremacists are sending to non-white people is, yeah, you know, the system exists. It's unfortunate, you know, and I benefit from it. But I ain't doing nothing to get the benefits. I just benefit from it. See, that's the message that they're trying to send to us. And we are sucking it up. We're sucking it up. But really, white privilege is just another way to say white power. That's all it is.
I want to get in. We are encroaching on the 3-minute mark, so it could get interesting. We will see what happens. I would suggest, if you think you might want to talk or listen, call in now. The number is 347-215-6071. I wrote the people at Blog Talk Radio. I have not heard back. I wrote them again, I'll say. This was not the first time. I haven't heard back. I encourage you to write as well, but, you know, we'll see what happens. Right. Everybody who called in, your line is open. And as I said, if we get disconnected, I'll do the show in 3.5 hours. So it'll be, if you're on the West Coast, that'll be 3 a.m. If you're on the West Coast, that'll be midnight if we get disconnected. But everybody who dialed in, your line is open. And Justice, do you want to give your email and blog in case, you know, we do get disconnected? You at least get that info out.
Yes, justice.asap@yahoo.com. Again, justice.asap@yahoo.com. Just do justice today.blogspot.com. Again, just do justice today.blogspot.com.
Fundraising, invest. She has PayPal on her blog, and I have links in the description. Invest, super helpful. And you should probably call now if you think you want to listen. 347-215-6071. Everyone who called in with hand up, your line is open.
Hello. Hi. Hi, my name is
Hello.
Isha, and I'm calling from Maryland. How y'all doing this evening? I apologize if I was making noise. I had put the phone on mute. Am I speaking to the great Neely Fuller Jr.? Hello?
No, ma'am. I'm not Neely Fuller Jr.
Okay, I apologize. You just sounded like Neely Fuller Jr. because I just came in on the end, and I know he talks about white supremacy a lot, too. Your voice just sounded similar to him. But
I'm hearing that more and more these days.
You sound like him, and, you know, I was listening on Blog Talk. I was like, he sounds just like him, but the name's different. You know, I just wanted to double-check that. I just chimed in, and somehow I haven't been getting the original host of the show, I haven't been getting your reminders. I don't know what's going on, but I made sure I put it under my favorites. That way, when your show come on Sundays, I can catch it. But it's a lot of white supremacy and racism that goes on right now. It's just, you can't, you're a fool if you can't see that racism is going on right now. You know, it's right in front of us. Hello?
Yes, I'm sorry. Were you asking a question?
Oh no, I mean I was just voicing my opinion. I mean I wasn't.
Okay.
I was just saying racism is going on in front of our very own eyes, and you're a fool you're basically denying the fact what's going on. You know, like I look at our president now that he's in the White House, it's like the whole world want to crumble. You know, everybody going through riots and all that, and it's like they want to blame everything on Obama. You know, like the economy isn't doing so well. You know, you can only do so much.
Did you get a chance to listen to the interview that was just made with Dr. Terpstra, I believe her name was?
That's her name. You're correct, sir.
Thank you.
What is her name?
Oh, you didn't hear that?
No, I haven't. What's her name, Doc?
I think Gus would do a better job of pronouncing it.
Okay.
She is a white woman who says that she is in recovery from white supremacy, and her name is Dr. June Terpstra. She spoke about white supremacy and white privilege and being Italian, and you know how she played on talking about white supremacy.
Wow. Oh, wow. We had to check that interview out. Yeah.
It was a very interesting interview. As a matter of fact, one of the things that she said is that white people collectively are more powerful than non-white people collectively. Now, there is a president of the United States that's not a white person.
Okay.
Running the most powerful nation on the planet, quote unquote. These are the things that people say. He is the leader of the free world, the leader of the most powerful nation on the planet. He's a non-white person, but he still falls into the category of not being as powerful as white people. I mean, you really have to understand what people are saying when they're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
I just wanted to, the people that called in that had a hand up, someone at 8162, and there was someone else at a block number, your lines are open, and I just wanted to remind people to keep the background noise down. If you're in a noisy area, if you could use your mute button, that would be very helpful. I'm trying to, balance it, but there are a lot of people online, so, I mean, it really would be super helpful to preserve the quality of the program. Use your mute button. Try to stay in a quiet area. If you're not talking, just use your mute button until you want to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to ask. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like to ask Dr. Williams, what does he think motivates the white people who practice racism, white supremacy to be racist?
What do I think motivates them to be racist?
Yeah.
Racism. Racism, white supremacy motivates them to practice racism, white supremacy. It is a value in and of itself.
Okay.
They don't need any other value system. That one is working just fine for them. Now, what do you think will motivate non-white people to produce a system of justice?
Is that a rhetorical question, or is that an actual question?
No, sir. I'm not sure what a rhetorical question is. That's a question that I'm interested in hearing your opinion and answer to it.
Okay.
Because it doesn't appear to me that being mistreated on the basis of color is motivation enough.
Why do you think that? Because
if that was motivation enough, I mean, the system of racism, white supremacy would be out of business. Would have been out of business long ago. I mean, just looking at the evidence. So what is it that you think is going to motivate non-white people to produce a system of justice?
Well, at this point now, I don't have an answer to that question. I don't think all non-white people are even thinking about a system of justice coming into place. Most non-white people, I don't think, are aware that there is a system of racism, white supremacy in place. So I think that the more non-white people become aware or conscious that the system is in place, I think that right there, I think, will motivate more non-white people to replace it with. Well, then again, I would like to know what do you mean by justice? Because people have different definitions of justice.
I'm hearing television. I'm hearing the television or some music. If you, okay, I think we're good now. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Williams.
Oh, not a problem, sir. Thank you. When I say justice, I mean a planet where no person is mistreated and the person who needs help the most get the most help.
Knowing how imperfect the world is, I can't envision a world where nobody will be mistreated. Because I don't know how people, I don't know how everyone thinks, and I don't know how everyone responds and reacts to different things.
6390, your line is open. 6390, your line is keeping the background noise down, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, this is Don in Oklahoma, and I have my telephone off mute. I am honored to be in this forum with you, Gus, and with Little Justice, and also Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams. I think that you sound like Neely Fuller because you don't answer a question quickly. You listen to the question being asked, and you think about what you want to say, and then you answer in a way. And so I think that's why you probably sound like Neely Fuller, Dr. Fuller, and your voice is very similar to the tone of your voice. However, I call to say that I think you're raising some questions concerning white supremacy and racism that is very poignant and very important, that causes one to pause and contemplate exactly what you have said. You have said that what is a white person in essence? Because if you talk about color as being the defining of a person's color, that what we know with reference to color, we know that air, like you said, is colorless. We can't see it. We know the wind blows, but we can't see it. We can see through it. So obviously there's no color within air. And as you said, if a white person was standing in air, nothing else there, you would be able to distinguish that individual from the air.
Yes, sir.
And so that makes me have to take a look at, well, exactly who is white? What is white? And that's why the lady probably didn't want to answer it, because when she answers it, then we go back to then there really is no difference. We're talking about shades of color. And we're relating power with reference to the shade of an individual human being. And that then takes you to the necessary question of, well, could it be that we're really talking about mistreating one another? And then we can come in with what we know as a system of fairness. And you may even call it justice if you want to.
Whoa. Please, let's not equate fairness with justice. I'm just saying that could be an extrapolation. I'm not saying that it is. You know, I'm saying that some people in this world would say, I'm fair and I'm just. I'm sure you've heard that, Gus. Although they may be in error, okay? Because I'm talking universally. I'm talking worldwide. I'm not talking about just keeping us here in this United States on a colored island. I'm expanding our vision beyond the shores of America. And I'm trying to get us to see that picture that Dr. Is this Dr. Williams? Are you a doctor, sir?
No,
an educator?
Sir. I don't think that I've healed anyone of anything.
Are you an educator?
Just Edward Williams would be fine, sir.
Okay, then, because I'd like to respect people, and if they have titles, I like to acknowledge that, because they did put in some time for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and to me, you are a person that is giving out very pertinent and relative information, regardless of titles, because we're not even dealing with titles, because most of the people that I know that were great never even went to school. So to get back to the subject matter, I think that you raised some very interesting points that here with reference to what you have said, and I listened to you last night, and I listened to a lot of the archives that Gus has on his show also. But we need to think about what you are saying and use our mind to delve into the realness of the situation that you're talking about, because Isha, I think, is saying that maybe most of the people in the world don't know about the system of white supremacy, but I guarantee you what they do know is that the more melanated people in this world are catching more hell than those that's less melanated, i.e. the continent of Africa. And everywhere you find melanated people, the less melanin in your skin, the more off you're going to be, usually. And when you look at the phraseology, when I was coming up, it used to be, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. If you're black, definitely stay back. And so that principle of white supremacy is not confined and limited to what our environment is in this country. And so although they may not put a white supremacist label on it, they certainly have suffered at the hands of those who have the power. And like you said, the ones in this country have the power. When we were brought here on that middle during the Middle Passage on those slave ships, we were under the total control and totally dependent upon the captain of that ship and that crew to make that voyage and to take care of us one way or another. Now, we may have had to eat the slop that the sailors leftovers, and we were cattle, treated as cattle, non-humans. But we began a transformation from where we were over to the new world here in America, and in the Americas and the islands and Europe, and we were totally subject to our captors. And so that system has been in place ever since 1500, 1600, and everything we know and everything we have done in this country as black people or people of color, melanated people, whatever you want to say, we have been totally dependent upon our captors to where we don't even own hardly a skyscraper in this country. So white supremacy is live and well, and the president, although he is the leader of a free nation, supposedly, he does wield the power, but he wields the shared power because he is acting at the behest and the strategy of the overall scheme of the Wall Street bankers and the corporatists in this country, which control America now. So I appreciate it, Mr. Williams, sir, and I respect you for educating our people as to what we need to do, how to think, and how to survive and prosper, even though we live under a system of white supremacy. And Gus, I thank you for your efforts in compiling over 300 shows and informing anyone who comes into your chat room or in your presence about reality, so that you don't point fingers at the manifestation of a white supremacist system, such as the drugs in our community, the crimes, which are manifestations of a system designed to produce that called white supremacy. So instead of focusing so much on the manifestations of it, let's begin to understand and deal with the etiology, beginning, the origin of white supremacy and racism, and then let's begin to tackle it and address it there. Okay? That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Non-Mighty Wick, did you were you able to call in? Is your line open?
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks for taking my call. Let's see. I believe I've heard you previously on a recording, Mr. Williams. You were speaking something to the effect of not allowing a person to function as a white person. If you remember the context of that, if you can elaborate on what that was, and what is the process for not allowing or refusing to allow a person to function as a white person?
I'm not sure what that was in reference to. If I said it, I don't remember saying it. If it was in context with anything at all, it was I was talking about not saying what needs to be said are doing what needs to be done to make sure that I am not harmed, and to also make sure that I get the help that I need when I need it, the constructive help that I need. So if I said anything at all, it had to be in reference to those two things. There are some non-white people who say that all white people are racist white supremacists. There are some non-white people who say that some white people are and some white people are not. That's just a talking point for white people. There's no need for non-white people to have to argue with each other about which white person is a white supremacist or not. It doesn't make any sense at all. That's for white people to decide. What non-white people should do is use words and actions to replace the system of racism, white supremacy with a system of justice. And stop being so concerned about what each other are doing. The white people who practice racism, white supremacy, use that to their advantage to keep non-white people focused on and in conflict with each other. So when non-white people start talking about or arguing over whether or not a person is a white person or a racist white supremacist, that doesn't help non-white people at all. So when you start talking about keeping a white person from functioning as a white person, what does a white person do that nobody else does? I mean, I have no idea.
I know they really. I'm sorry to interrupt the conversation. Non-white folks, they read and they gather and they collect information, something that our race of people we fail to do. The old saying, if you want to keep information from a colored person, just put it in a book. Put it in a book. Remember when they destroyed those empires thousands of years ago, the first thing that they destroyed was the knowledge that were in those books. That's one of the reasons why we are crippled, because a lot of the knowledge that was beneficial to our race are gone. Once that knowledge was gone, you notice our empire, our reign, all that went down right along with us.
Yeah, Bobby, I may recall somewhat of what the context was when I heard, when I thought I heard about in regards to refusing to allow a person to function as a white person. I think it may have had something to do with, I guess, not allowing a non-white person some way or another with words to, I don't know if it was to defend white people with words or to answer questions that only a white person could answer. Maybe it was in some kind of regard like that. Maybe if you can give an example of a question and answer where you could ask a certain type of question that is specified for a white person would only know the answer to, but you've seen where non-white people try to answer that question instead. If you could, thank you.
Okay, no problem. As a matter of fact, I already have. And you just saw an example of a non-white person attempting to answer it. The question that I asked is, what does a white person do that nobody else does? Now, presumably, you have to be a white person to know the answer to that question. I mean, if you're a white person, you know all it means, everything that there is to know about being a white person. That's what makes you a white person. And as soon as I asked that question, a non-white person attempted to answer it.
I have a question.
Did that happen on the program today?
That just happened.
I'm sorry?
It just happened. When I was talking to him, the guy that asked the question, I don't know his name. I apologize to referring to him as him. I asked the question, well, what does a white person do? Because I started answering the question by giving a little background, and I was bringing it back to answering his question directly by saying, so when you start talking about someone functioning as a white person, which is what his question was about, I said, what does a white person do that nobody else does? And a lady who I presume was a non-white female came right in behind that.
I'm black. I mean, I'm African American. So
Oh,
a non-white
okay.
person. I answered the question. I'm sorry.
No, not a problem, man. That's not a problem at all.
Okay.
Not a problem at all. I'll call you whatever you want to be called. If you want me to call you African American, I'll call you that. Not a problem. It's no problem.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want it to sound like I was being hostile.
Oh, no. Not at all. Not at all. I don't think.
Also, one of the other reasons why these non-colored people dominate also is you keep your enemy closest. You learn everything you can about those individuals and use it against them. Kind of like, if you're on the job, and you have to train a non-colored person, they're your best friend until they, in return, get that promotion. And then you'll see their true side. It's kind of like the same, logic. I mean, you learn everything about that individual. So that too could have a strategy.
Thank you very much. And for the gentleman that asked the question, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Not a problem.
How do you make the distinction when you ask that question, about what a white person does? How do you make the distinction between whether the person answering your question is a non-white person who's speaking up or this is a white person who's attempting to answer that question?
Well, usually if I'm asking that question, I would first ask the question to the person that I'm asking that question to, are you a white person? And if the person says that they're a white person, then I'll presume to ask them the second question. If that's the question that I want the answer to, what does a white person do that nobody else does? I've asked white people that question, and they can't seem to answer it. Now there was an experiment that we ran years ago in D.C. Called Counter Move 6, and it was videoed by Josh Wickett. There was a guy. There was a male there. Now, I mean, he looked like he could have been Hitler's brother to me. But he said that he was not a white person. That he said he was a Jew. He was not a white person, he was a Jew. And no matter how many questions we asked this guy about, can a white person also be a Jew? Yes, it can. Okay. We just a gamut of questions. Because white people will use the Jewish angle if it helps to keep non-white people confused. And so he said he was not a white person. No problem there. So when we began to ask questions that only white people could answer, such as what does a white person do that nobody else does, he began to attempt to answer it. And we said, well, wait a minute. But you're not a white person. How can you answer that question? And so that may be what was being discussed on an audio that the gentleman who asked the question was talking about. That may be what he was talking about. There were people, non-white people there in that experiment who were attempting to keep him from functioning as a white person. So that may be what his question was in reference to. It was a very interesting experiment, I tell you. I mean, what we had was a group of white people, a group of non-white people, and the white people got to function as non-white people, and the non-white people got to function as white people. Now, here's the kicker, is that only one of the white people who was a white male was functioning as a racist white supremacist. All the other white people that were functioning as non-white people were females. All the non-white people were males. So not only did you have the white, non-white, you had the gender factor as well. So it was a very interesting experiment, and even while running the experiment, some of the black males, such as John Bilal, stated that he said, he just hung his head and shook his head. He said, wow, this is blowing my mind. Because what the non-white people were supposed to do, the non-white males were supposed to do, were to act as if they were in a system of justice. But what they did is they act like racist white supremacists. I'm not sure what that means. And later, when we were discussing it, some of the non-white males, being told that, well, you were supposed to be producing a system of justice, whether you are a white person or a non-white person. He said, well, some of those non-white males said, well, I don't have any examples of that. I don't know how to do that. Now, these are non-white people who know about counter-racism code. They've known about it a lot longer than I have. But when they were put into the position to be able to produce justice, even though it was just an experiment, they stated that they didn't know how to do that. I thought that was extremely interesting. So it may have been one of those audios where, we were discussing keeping a person from functioning as a white person. And we were probably talking about that one male during that experiment.
And just to be clear, I'm not sure if I've seen that experiment that you're saying. It was during that experiment, it was a non-white male who, I guess you said for the experiment was supposed to be a white person who was attempting to produce that accurate?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, sir.
I'm not sure where that background is coming from, but I'll attempt again. I was asking about the experiment that you talked about. I don't believe I've seen it. I was curious, were you saying that it was a black male or a non-white male, and part of the experiment was that he was supposed to pretend to be a white person who was trying to produce justice? Is that accurate?
Right. But this was a non-white male that looked like a white person. He could have been a white person. He looked like he could have been Hitler's brother to me. Now, all the other non-white males were as dark as I am, or thereabouts. I'm not sure if you've seen pictures of me, but there are videos on my website that I'm in the videos. I mean,
he looks like Ivan Dixon.
I'm sorry? Who is Ivan Dixon?
He's nothing but a man. You gotta see nothing but a man. I
watched that on YouTube. I watched it on YouTube, just like you said.
The main character, Duff. You don't think Duff favors you in any way?
We're about the same skin tone.
Man, is anybody on the line has seen Mr. Williams and has also seen Nothing But a Man? Anybody on the line have a view?
They don't favor each other.
They favor one another.
Yeah, no, they don't look similar to me.
I have seen Dr. Williams.
Say again, I'm sorry?
No, I said I've never seen you. This is my first time hearing about you. That's why I apologize, because I just thought you was Dr. Fuller Jr. Y'all sound just alike, like me and the guy from Ohio was saying.
But
I'll make sure I check you out and check out your website and your YouTube videos.
Yeah, I got some YouTube videos as well. So, and you can watch Nothing But a Man on YouTube. It's in 9 parts. I watched it last night when Gus.
Was that your first time seeing it, sir?
Yes, sir. I believe so. Yes, sir. I believe it's my first time seeing it.
What did you think? What did you think about the film?
Just like all films that are produced under this system, there are things in it to help white people keep the system going, and things in it that non-white people do to help us to function as subject people. I mean, they're all basically the same. Stories in books, in magazines, pictures, stories, movies. I mean, there's no need for a white person to teach their child to mistreat somebody on the basis of color. White people are going to get that. I mean, they don't have to have a classroom for that. They're going to get that. They're going to get it. It's in cartoons. You know what I mean? I mean, we talked about that just the other night. I mean, it's everywhere. Magazines, books, films.
I agree. I'm sorry. I wanted to chime in. I don't know how to. You can see it. More and more. I'm starting to see more and more shows where the black men are starting to date white women, non-colored women. They're starting to bring that forth.
Non-colored women.
Starting to see more and more of that. I don't know if that's a subliminal message, but how it is. And the people of color who are on shows are females. They will pass the what you call it, the paper bag test, because they're lighter than that paper bag. Very few women who have dark complexion ever make it to the mainstream.
What does a non-colored woman look like?
A non-colored woman has silky hair most of the time. They silky hair. They don't have no pigmentation. Besides the actual, the albino, black melanin. But the ones who look close in their image are usually the ones that's on the TV shows or on television. Has a loud background.
Who knows how long that's been going on?
Of course.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of noise in the background.
Yeah.
So did anybody have any ideas about the doctor that was interviewed tonight?
Very defensive.
No.
I think that she, fits she's using the same language that I think Justice and you pointed out, all these other so-called anti-racists, they all pull from the same playbook. You got to watch for that. They'll be real good at trying to say that, racism exists, and there's some white people who are racist, but guess what? I'm not one of them. Or they might even say, hey, I am one of them, but they'll use words to try to get you to agree to that some of them are good to go. Good to go meaning, down to help you out to get rid of white supremacy.
Right.
Can I be heard?
Hello? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
The Dr. Terpstra, I found her to be very confusing, especially around this being a recovering racist, and I found that to be new coded language that white people are using. Is it? And this recovering, which gives you the imagery of a recovery program with 12 steps. And if she hadn't fled, I would have asked her what these 12, if she had some steps and what they were. Did anyone else understand that, or found it confusing, or?
I heard someone on the line a female on the line was asking her questions about that. Is that female still on the line?
Yes,
I'm
as
still
a matter of fact,
on the line, but
I'm still, hello? I am still on the line, and that was one comment I was going to add regarding that whole little piece of dialogue regarding recovery and what
I never
she
heard
was actually recovering from.
Right, I never heard her answer to your question. Did she ever answer it, or?
Not clearly. It was a bit confusing. She answered it by saying, from birth, she came into the world somewhat as a person without all of the constructs of thinking and behaving as a white supremacist, and then she sort of incurred that. So it's like she was born into this system, and it was all put on her, and so her end point, I suppose, when she sees herself as being, recovered, is that she would no longer be sort of, I suppose, practicing racism, white supremacy.
She said that?
She didn't say that. I didn't get, and I wanted to follow up after Gus followed up with a question, because she said, Gus asked her the question, something to the effect, but she said all her life, and she's always witnessed it since she was a young child, people behaving in a way towards, non-whites. It wasn't really answered, but I was going to ask her, had she ever practiced, did she ever experience herself practicing racism, white supremacy? Because on one hand, she's trying to say, I was just born into this. I didn't do this. I didn't have any part of it, and I'm different from them. And if that's the case, then what are you recovering from if you never did?
Right.
That was the last final question. My follow-up question was going to be to her.
She said she marched and she witnessed.
She witnessed it, right?
She's staying in the privileged lane. She's trying to stay in the privileged lane rather than staying in the powerful lane. She's trying to make it seem as though there's a distinction between the two.
Well, I found it very interesting how early on in the conversation that she referred to the discussion as tense and tension.
And was that in reference to the seriousness of the black people?
I believe so, and I also think that she was a bit unnerved by Justice, and Justice's very pointed questions and seeking clarity. And I didn't find the conversation. I didn't find anything being said to be tense except her.
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake about it. There's no distinction between powerful and privileged when white people are talking about. When they talk about white privilege, they are talking about white power. Now, if they can confuse you into thinking that those two things are separate, then they got you. Because they'll have you thinking that there's something that's called, and this is what it used to be called. This was before white privilege came out. It was something called unintentional racism.
Unaware.
I don't know if you ever heard that term. Yeah, unaware racism, unintentional racism. Yeah, meaning that they're mistreating you on the basis of color, but they don't know that they're doing it. Like you care whether or not they know they're doing it. See what I mean? So they got all kinds of...
I think that leaves the door open for, see, I'm a victim too.
The gay people, can't forget about the gay people.
You said you're a victim too. You're a victim of what?
No, that I think when they say it's unintentional and I'm unaware that, see, I'm a victim too.
Right.
You can't blame me because I'm a victim too, like you.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm good to go. I'm here to help you get rid of white supremacy too.
Right.
I
what did you think about? I was interested in her sort of consistent use of, that was just tongue in cheek.
And she's married to a non-white person.
What'd you say, Gus?
She said she is married to a non-white person.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I thought that was interesting and related to her constant reference of being tongue in cheek.
Yeah. That's funny.
She's witty and clever. She doesn't have to be serious about racism. She's witty.
Mm-hmm. Being serious about racism makes it too tense for her.
Mm-hmm.
Then what would be her purpose? Why do what she's doing?
I don't think Dr. Terpstra, I think that's her last name. I don't think she answered the question that I asked her. She didn't give me a straightforward answer. The question was, I don't remember it exactly, but I think it was, do you think all white people are fundamentally insane, being that according to Dr. Jacob Carruthers, a major part of the white psyche and mind, or central to the white psyche and mind, is the conquest or dominion of nature. And she didn't give me a straight answer. Now, what do you mean by insane? What is the definition of insane? Of course, people have different definitions, but if it's true that white people have a diminished presence of melanin and melatonin in them, then it's possible that that can contribute to their being insane. And I look at an insane person as a person who's mentally unbalanced. So that's what I think.
Well, if we take that definition, there ain't no sane people on this planet. Nowhere.
Wow.
You got people who are practicing racism, white supremacy, people who allow it to be practiced, and people who are victims of it. And ain't none of those people sane.
Well, I would add, it would seem to me to make sense, given the system that we are in, based on insanity, if it's true, and I think that it is, insanity is a sane response to an insane world, then it would seem to me to stand to reason that there would be, all of us would be a bit insane, because the world, the system of racism, white supremacy, is insane, because it does support and works actively to cause intentional harm to people based on race. When we're talking racism, it also plays itself out in terms of gender and class as well.
No,
there are acts of intentional harm. You say no.
Based on color.
It's based on color. Okay.
It's based on color. See, as soon as you get away from the color aspect, you're confusing yourself. You're going to start confusing yourself. I guarantee it. Because white people will help you throw other stuff into it. Homosexuality, they'll help you throw that right on in. And class. Might as well pile that on the top. Yeah. No, it's a system based on color. And as soon as you get away from that, you're going to end up being confused.
And the white people going to love it. They can't wait till they slip away from that.
Oh, yeah. They're going to help you try to slip away from it.
Do you
think,
Edward, do you think that sexism exists, if you will?
What do you mean by sexism?
Mistreating people based on gender. This is a system of patriarchy and patriarchal practices.
Yeah, sure it exists. People are mistreated on the basis of being left-handed. Why is everything right-handed?
Right.
And I
people are mistreated for a lot of different reasons. But the overarching reason for the system of racism and white supremacy being in place
the word is based off
mistreatment of people based on color.
Yes, and there's no doubt in my mind about that. I totally agree with that 100%. I'm not confused about that in any way.
Once we're in a system of justice, you won't have sexism.
Right.
It won't exist because no person will be mistreated.
Okay. But it was interesting, and I haven't watched the video about the experiment that y'all did yet. I found it interesting to hear when the non-white, I think you said the non-white men were, placed in a position or to assume the position of white people and who were practicing a system of justice. Yet I think I heard you say that what began to happen, it sounded like that they were behaving, it seemed, in a patriarchal way towards the other participants in the study.
No, they were mistreating them. It had nothing to do with patriarchy.
Okay,
so
they were mistreating. But they were mistreating them then based on gender in the study. Is that right?
They were mistreating them.
So they were mistreating non-white males and females when they were placed in the position of being a white person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were just mistreating them.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Looks like we are going to be able to do the full program with no hitches. How about that? Anything you all want to get out, we'll be back tomorrow. Frank Wilderson, black male, he authored a book on cinema and racism. Someone requested this gentleman a couple weeks back, but I'm old and victimized. I don't remember who it was, but he'll be here tomorrow. That would be Monday, January 31st at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, and 6 p.m. Pacific. Please invest, share links for the program, and anything you would like to share. You have about 2 minutes, 40 seconds. We'll be back. I'll flip a coin, see how I feel. If I want to do a later broadcast, subscribe and you'll get the updates. Replace white supremacy with justice. Feel free to share.
Gus, I wanted to know, you had the book about Geronimo Pratt on the page. What was your intent in relationship with Terpstra?
That book did a lot in terms of just being suspicious of white people and how deadly the system of white supremacy is. That book shared a lot of constructive information about just how evil this system is and what they will do to black people who make an effort to counter racism. That's the type of thing I try to keep in mind when I'm talking to a white person, to make sure that I keep my guard up. And I'm serious, deadly serious, because that's the way that they get down. Deadly. Dr. Cambone, that should be a nice way to end the program. Wow. Dr. Cambone.
Our people are very serious about not being very serious.